Sports Around the Bar back, and hopefully with fewer technical issues. Drew, it's college day, and you're here with us, man. I'm excited. I'm glad you're here.
Yeah, I tried to be here last night's show, and Mother Nature and all of its great things decided to
make sure that didn't happen.
Tell us no, that's not going to happen.
Make plans and then listen for God laughing at you. That's an old saying. But we're glad you're here now, and hopefully you can see and hear us.
He laughs a lot at me.
Yeah. We're hoping that, again, we don't have any technical issues. If we do, let us know in the comments. We'll do whatever we can to try to fix it. But we're going to try to make it. So, again, technical issues knocking on the door.
Baby, I'm busy.
Today, we are going to go over the primetime games that we missed out on yesterday. We're also going to talk about college football coming up this week, everything you need to watch as we go into crunch time, and then we're going to round it out with Thursday night football as well as anything else you guys want to talk about. So, Drew, while I fire up the rest of the show, what are you most excited about, or what did you go into? You had a bold prediction about these games?
I did, a bold prediction after these games. Sean, how's it going, man? Glad you could join us. We did kind of get into a little bit of the Bears and Rams game last episode, even though it was, 10 minutes long until we had technical issues. And we didn't get too much in the Chiefs and Chargers. And we do want to get back into those games so we can do it. But I do have a bold prediction after we get done talking about the Kansas City and Chargers game.
Okay, you're saving it for the end. My bad.
I am. But, no, I do. I'm glad you reminded me because I do want to bring that back up.
Well, let's talk about the Chiefs and the Chargers then.
You don't want to
All right, let's rehash the Bears and the Rams. What a snooze fest. Nobody wanted to play any offense. At least Todd Gurley touched the ball 25 times. Could we be getting into that stretch like I've kind of suspected that season's winding down? Time for Gurley to start getting those 30 touches a game.
It's week 11. There is no snap count, especially the way their season went. I get the reason why they did it, but now it's time to move on and get this guy rolling because he is the offense. I know we have different opinions about Jared Goff.
We do.
But there is no doubt about it that he is the engine that makes this offense go.
Yeah, and I mean, you definitely want to see more out of Jared Goff. There's no argument here.
Talking about Todd Gurley, by the way, is the engine.
Oh, okay. Todd Gurley, for sure. Yeah. And I agree. Jared Goff needs to play better, but I think they need to put him in a better situation to play better. We'll talk about that a little bit more. It was pretty obvious the Bears is not the game where that starts, right? The offensive line doesn't wake up and shut down the Bears' defense and go run the ball for 400 yards. But I think Gurley did okay. He ran for almost 100. He had 25 carries. I think even though it didn't look like Todd Gurley of old, it looked like a decent game, and maybe, now that we're towards the back half of the season, we're going to see old Todd Gurley moving into the playoff race.
I mean, I still think he looked good. I mean, that's a Bears defense. I know they haven't been playing up to what you thought they were going to do, or anyone thought they were going to do, for that matter, but it was still a great outing for Todd Gurley. Brian, good to see you. He says his boys Sooners are going to sneak back in there. Talking about.
Were you worried when they were down 28-3 to Baylor last week? I was like, wow, Baylor's legit, because I was the one going into that game like, oh, here we go. Baylor undefeated to this point. Now they got to play the Sooners. Game over. And then it was 28-3. I was like, okay, I guess Baylor is good. And then they blew it. Yeah. They channeled their inner Atlanta, and they blew it. The Sooners did a good job coming back. That was one of the most spectacular halves of football I've ever seen.
Yeah.
But we'll talk about them in a little bit. To go on, Jacob says, Rivers is trash. And funny that this comes out.
He's actually 2 cans of trash.
2 things of trash. Okay, well, it's funny that after this game, he comes out and says, I want to be the next Titan quarterback. Is that just appropriate or what? I don't know if I believe those leaks. There's been rumors that the Titans have wanted him, and he's wanted to come to Nashville for a long time. But we'll talk about that a little bit when we talk about that game. Any final thoughts for the Bears and Rams, Drew?
No, we can move on.
And Jesse wants to know, are we going to discuss Ben Askren's retirement? We can. Again, we don't talk a ton of MMA, but we can talk about it if you want to talk about it. It's, again, MMA is a tough sport, and we see a lot of retirements and a lot of unretirements where guys come back. Do you think Askren's done?
It's hard to tell. I mean, honestly.
Conor McGregor's been retired, and the rumors are every time a big fight comes up, Conor McGregor's coming back for this
but it's a little bit different with him.
Yeah.
To be honest, I think maybe there's underlying injuries that Ben just hasn't been able to heal, and he just wants to take away. When this retirement happens, they're not training like they're ready to fight.
Right.
They're still going to be training. They're still gym rats.
You'd be somewhat in shape.
But it's a little bit different. There's a different mentality. There's a different way of going on. There's not a nutrition. You don't have your dietitian always there making sure you only eat.
It's not balls to the walls
boiled
for 4 months.
Steamed whatever they eat. What's completely bland food. I don't know, man. I mean, I guess we are talking about it. To be honest with you, it's a little bit of a shocker, but it doesn't really surprise me. Like you said, the sport's violent, and like I said, injuries that are underlying injuries that don't heal right.
Right.
This is where
especially
this stuff
in
comes
MMA.
from. Yeah.
Yeah. And Sean says, Jake and Drew, when are we going to talk about the New York Yankees and free agency? We can talk about that right now. Free agency is going to be deep with pitchers. There's going to be a lot of them out there, starting with guys like Steven Strasburg and Garrett Cole. This is where you buy your ace. The Yankees, I said it before, going into this season, pretty much all the way through the season, I was like, they have the bats. They don't have the starting pitching, and I think that's what kind of came up short on the Astros. You could say maybe the Astros stole some signs, and that was the difference, but we'll see more about that in a few weeks.
Brian Cashman has already gone out and said that his aim is pitching. So, to be honest, I think they're going to nail one of those guys.
And I think they'll try to retain as many of their own guys as they can.
I think so, too.
We'll see what happens. When you have a lineup that got you that far, you want to keep that together, but we all know if the Yankees are going to win another one, they at least need another starting pitcher. And they need an ace.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Brian says he was hella worried when Baylor was on top. No doubt about it. Nathan says, Rams, yo. Does that win, Nathan, excite you for the rest of the year? I mean, to me, I still think it was a very poor outing. Yes, they didn't have Robert Woods. Yes, they didn't have Brandon Cooks. But this is why you paid Jared Goff all that money. This is why you made him one of the highest paid quarterbacks in the league, because you need to be able to work with whatever weapons you have. And let's just admit it, that passing, I know it's the Bears defense, that passing game was absolutely terrible.
On one hand, I agree. I see your point. But on the other hand, I'm going to say you went into an ugly game with a team desperate for a win to get into the playoffs, and you took care of business. Yes, It wasn't pretty, but you scored the 17 points. They only scored 7. The defense stepped up when the offense didn't.
Right.
Even though the Bears have struggled all year long, they're still a team in playoff contention. Even today, even after that loss, they're still in playoff contention. I think this is a better win than people are talking about for the Rams, because the Bears, despite them not winning a lot of games, a lot of them have been very close. They are in these games. They're just not a great team.
Yeah, Nathan says no, he's not impressed about it. And what's up, man? Glad you could join us. Jesse said also a big boxing match this weekend. I can see the faces. I just can't think of the names.
I'm not as big of a boxing fan, I'll be honest with you. But
I read something about it.
Was it Wilder? Is it Wilder fighting this weekend?
Yeah.
I mean, I like boxing, but I'm definitely more MMA heavy than I am in boxing. Boxing to me is like watered down MMA. And I was a boxing fan before MMA took off. I enjoyed it. I like watching fights, but as soon as the UFC came out there and we're seeing that level of combat versus boxing where it's like UFC has almost ruined boxing for me. And when I say that, I mean boxing, because it was the only game in town, I was like, hey, this is pretty cool. These guys are fighting for 12 rounds, right? Now that I've got UFC and I'm watching guys do leg locks and everything else, like hitting guys with triangles, I'm like, it's hard going back to boxing for me.
I got another bold statement for that.
Go ahead.
I think people like Floyd Mayweather hurt boxing.
Do you?
Yeah. You sit there and you choose your opponents. Mm-hmm. You don't fight the best opponents during their prime, and then you go off and be undefeated and hold the belt for so long, but you're not fighting everyone. I mean, that was the biggest knock about Floyd Mayweather, is he wasn't willing to fight people at their prime.
And he ducked Pacquiao forever, yeah.
Exactly.
And fought him when he got old, so you can say, oh, I won.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, I think that hurt boxing. I think it should be like the MMA where it's a ladder system and you literally fight your way to the top, and the champ in a sense didn't have an option. He
has
to fight.
And you can't have, as one of your biggest promoters, one of the guys who's actively fighting in your sport. You just can't do it because at that point, like you said, he's going to control all the matchups.
Exactly.
He's going to control all the hype. This is his PR firm going out there telling all these guys, hey, say you could beat Floyd Mayweather and we'll advertise that to kind of hype the fight and get people to buy these pay-per-views. And then he goes into it and he's fighting these people that don't deserve to be in the ring with him. And I also think there has been such a top-heavy level of boxing where you've had guys like Floyd Mayweather that are just that much better than everybody.
Yeah.
This isn't the boxing from like the 60s and 70s anymore where there were a bunch of great fighters. You have Floyd Mayweather.
Or even the early 90s, realistically.
Yeah, you just have Floyd Mayweather running over everybody. I mean, that's pretty close to what it's been. And, again, we don't have to go too far into boxing here. I might go and watch it. Probably not something I'm going to pay for. You know what I'm saying? I might go watch it after the fact, sure. But I'm not necessarily as hyped for a boxing matchup as I would be for a huge UFC fight.
Nathan says boxing is greater than MMA for him. He also says the Rams are taking this year off.
They're still in the playoff. They're 6-4. But go ahead.
I want to get back to Scott's comment because I didn't mean to ignore it. He says, Scott, good to see you. He says, Ben got knocked out and it changed him, just like Ronda Rousey.
That happens a lot, though. Like,
I mean,
as soon as you're human. And UFC, everybody loses. That's the other cool thing. Like, everyone can have a loss or two in UFC. You lose in boxing, you're like, well, might as well call it a career.
Right.
But, yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with you. Guys get gun-shy when they get knocked out. Ronda Rousey is a great example of that, Scott. She got knocked out for the first time, and that was like, it's almost like the mirror or the portrait of herself in her mind was just ripped apart.
Yeah.
And she just never really came back from it. So, I don't know that Askren's exactly the same, at least not to the same degree, but that can happen to guys. You take that one bad kick to the head, and all of a sudden, every time somebody moves their foot, you're like, ooh.
Yeah.
I've been in it with a car crash. I had a bad car crash when I was in college, and you're like driving that highway speed in between a couple of semis. You're like, "Woo, not a comfortable situation." I can only imagine what it would be like for someone kicking you in the head like that.
Yeah, I didn't do it. I was not willing to sit there and take blows to my head and my face. I don't got a lot going for me. My face is my moneymaker.
Yeah, exactly. That's why you're here, right? It got us this far.
Frank, good to see you.
Good to see you, Frank, but we'll get back on football. Let's talk Chiefs-Chargers.
Let's do it.
I'm going to let you lead. It's your team. What did you see in that game?
There's so much to talk about in this game, and not only just because it put the Chiefs again at the top of the AFC West, and it kind of put the Chargers back down where they're probably more than likely done for the season. Beyond those two things, you saw greatness out of some and weakness out of others, and one of my bold predictions about these two games that I watched on these primetime games is all four of these teams had playoff hopes. All of them did. Every single one of them starting this year did. And this is it's not a bold prediction. It's more like a bold statement. And as you guys can all remember and tell, I'm a huge Kansas City Chiefs fan. That is my team. So this is why it's so crazy for me to say this. To be honest, all four of these teams at this point in time with the way they're playing, minus a few players, don't deserve to be in the playoffs in the NFL. And I'll tell you why, even with Kansas City, is obviously they're going to go as far as Patrick Mahomes is going to take them. Mm-hmm. I don't blame anything in this game on Patrick Mahomes. This guy is literally lighting the world up on fire. Everyone knows this. He is the future quarterback of the NFL. He's the golden boy at some point in time as soon as Brady decides to retire. But one guy, as you can all see by like Aaron Rodgers, doesn't mean you're going to win a Super Bowl. This defense, yeah, they got 4 takeaways. Yeah, Frank Clark finally looked good, like the reason we went out and traded a first-round pick and gave him all this money. But Phillip Rivers made our defense look better than what it really is. We were still giving up huge gouges in the run game. If you go into the playoffs, we're facing the Ravens and the Patriots. We're going to lose this game. We might even lose to the Texans right now, which I know if the season ended, that's the game we'd be matched up is the Texans. To be honest, I think we could probably lose that game.
That's a bit of an overreaction. Did you see what Baltimore did to them, both through the air and on the ground?
I
think the Chiefs win that.
My point is we're living and dying by Patrick Mahomes' arm and the health that he has.
Yes.
They start putting hits on him, this guy is going to not be able to do it. This is kind of what it's shown. Mm-hmm. We got to have some kind of mixture, especially when Tyreek goes down. This offense kind of puddles a little bit.
Who's been saying that forever? I was like, Tyreek Hill is the engine of the offense. From the sense of this team goes from being a good/great team, maybe even borderline elite without Tyreek Hill, because you have Travis Kelce. You're able to move the ball. You can run when you can pass like this. But when he's in there, it takes it to a whole nother level, where this team is going to stretch so many defenses so far away from the actual play, it opens up everybody underneath. It opens up the running game. You don't even have to throw it to him. He's just got to be out there, and defenses panic, and they're like, what are we going to do about him? That's what having like uncompromising speed and being able to run routes and having good hands can do for a team. And that's why Tyreek Hill's a top 5 wide receiver these days.
Yeah.
And I think they miss him. Yeah, the injuries have been a problem with him, especially for my fantasy team. Okay, let's talk about the real victim here.
Just because everyone's talking about Rivers and the comments that he has. You got Frank saying Rivers looks like he's hurt. Nathan said Rivers is the problem, blowing it in crunch time every time. I think this is what it is. And, of course, this is just from watching him play through the years of him playing against Kansas City. I think his body is not as keen as his mind is. I think his mind's still there. I think he's like, my receiver's going to be open at this point, and he'll throw the ball to where it should be. Problem is, he's underthrowing it or overthrowing it. His body is not doing the same as it used to. You are going to need to adapt an offense around Phillip Rivers to still make him a liable quarterback in the NFL. We all know 37-38 doesn't end quarterbacks anymore. Everyone's playing until they're 40.
Well, that's the want, but
I'm just saying,
can everybody do it?
I'm just saying you can adapt an offense around Phillip Rivers still and make him a good quarterback for a team. Someone like the Titans which I know you talked about this before. I think it was 2 years, maybe even last year. You'd be willing to take him. The question is now to you is...
Well, that was when he was 33. That was a long time ago.
Now,
but yeah.
with him playing like this, are you willing to adapt and change your offense for a quarterback like Phillip Rivers?
I think it's the same thing I complain about with Kirk Cousins and the same thing I complain about with Jared Goff, and it's something that the Chargers haven't done for a long time with Phillip Rivers, which is protect him. When was the last great Chargers offensive line? You got to go a ways back. They have been terrible up front.
It'd be one with Damien.
Yeah, exactly. Like, that's 15 years ago, or close to it. I'm exaggerating, but that was like almost 10 years ago. The Chargers have not done a good job protecting Phillip Rivers. And consistently, they've tried. They've brought in different guys. It's been, guys like Russell Okung and others. They've signed a lot of free agents to try to make things happen.
Russell Okung was out. I mean...
And it just, nothing, it's never seemed to work for it. He is a pocket passer that now is starting to physically decline. The difference is everyone's chasing that 45 number at quarterback. When you look at guys like Brady and you look at guys like Breeze, the consistent thing that we see from them every year, the offensive line protects them. Phillip Rivers has not had that to a lesser degree. Roethlisberger hasn't had that in the past few years. That's why these guys are starting to get hurt, and guys like Breeze and Brady are still trucking and still putting up numbers at 42 and 40 respectively.
But you got to see both of them have changed the offense around them. I mean, realistically, you don't see these guys doing 30, 40-yard bombs. They're more dink and dunk now. The run game is definitely what the offense relies on. That's what I'm getting at is the Chargers got away from that during the game because they were running all over Kansas City. When Kansas City got that lead, it got them concerned, and then Phillip Rivers threw the ball 55 times.
And that's a mentality loss. Again,
right, exactly.
That's a coaching loss, I should say.
But you cannot ask a 37-year-old quarterback to keep chucking the ball like that because physically he can't take it anymore.
I agree. I agree. They need to tailor their game towards the quarterback they have. The question is, are the Chargers a good enough organization to do it? We haven't seen it yet. I mean, they've had this guy for 15, 16, 17 years now. I think he's 17 years in the NFL or something like that. He's been in there a long time, Drew.
This is a second active streak.
Exactly. And we're still every year saying, man, the Chargers are letting Phillip Rivers get hit. Man, it never seems to be enough. That, and on top of it, everyone's like, he has all these great weapons. Does he, though?
And we've always said that his time's coming to an end.
I mean, Keenan Allen's a good player when he's on the field, but he's hurt all the time. Hunter Henry is like that guy that everyone's like, oh, look out. As soon as he figures it out, he's going to be amazing. When is Hunter Henry going to figure it out? You look at Mike Williams, same deal. I mean, you complain about Corey Davis not doing anything, man. What about Mike Williams, the guy who was drafted right after him? I'm just saying, Drew, like, how good are these weapons? He's got some good running backs. And I'm not saying he should be complaining because there's teams like the Jets and the Redskins that would kill to have those guys in their team. But it's not like this is Minnesota either, where they have 4 or 5 different viable and like world-beating options that these guys can go out and win you a game by themselves.
Yeah, and we all know that being part of the NFL is dealing with injuries. I mean, that's just not even the NFL. It's just a game of football. Injuries happen. You adapt and you change, and the better teams get over it. And it seems like so far with the Chargers, when injuries start happening, we are struggling, or they are struggling to stay a good team.
Exactly.
That's an issue.
I totally agree. I think a lot of it's organizational.
Scott says Father Time is undefeated, and he also says, does he, though?
I don't know. I mean, you tell me. If you think Phillip Rivers is just washed up, if you think Father Time's washed up, let me know. If you think Phillip Rivers is just washed up, was that what he was saying for?
No, it was a statement that you made.
Oh. No, did I say that?
Pretty sure.
I don't even know anymore. I wasn't even listening to myself, so my bad. All right. We'll move on.
Or maybe I said, does he, though? Who knows? Scott, clear it up for us.
We're just talking, man. We have no idea what we're doing. Let's talk about college football.
Let's do it.
Let's talk about last week and some of these games that came down the pipe. Drew, Georgia and Auburn, defensive struggle, but we have had another game where Georgia has gone without giving up 20 points. Against another highly ranked opponent in Auburn, does this team deserve to be in the playoff, Georgia? Because they have a bad loss to South Carolina. Things are getting a little chippy up top.
They do. Yeah, I'm going to go up and say that they right where they are. The 4th seed is, in my opinion, probably where they need to be.
You put them in over Bama? Even if they lose to LSU in the championship?
Depends
on... But Tua's not going to play, too.
Depends on the loss.
You're on the committee, Drew. Okay. So what's the number? What's the tipping point? Let me know. They're playing LSU. Is it 10 points? Is it 17? 25? Like, how bad do they have to get beat where Georgia needs to go in?
If their defense goes out and holds LSU down to like 14 points or less and they lose by anywhere from 3 to 7 points, it's not like 14-0. Mm-hmm. I think they're probably in it.
I think even 14-0. If you hold LSU to 0 points the way they've been throwing the ball, I'm like, give them a shot. right? I mean,
well, I meant the
mistakes.
14 points to LSU.
Yeah.
LSU's kind of hard to stop right now. They're just
Yes.
they're just steamrolling through everybody. I was saying if Georgia holds LSU to 14 points and they lose by 3 or 7 points, maybe they should be in it.
They could lose by 17 and hold LSU to 14. I don't know, not physically possible. They could go -3 on the scoreboard, Drew. If they hold LSU to 14 points, in my book, they're in.
They score a touchdown for them.
Yeah, exactly. So, again, I think Georgia, this is a great win for them. We'll talk about them coming up here a little bit more because I believe that, they play A&M this week. They have another tough matchup in a week where a lot of other teams are kind of idle and twiddling their thumbs towards the end of the season. I think that's going to go into the committee's mind. We'll talk about that when we talk about that game. This, to me, great win for them, but it's not the only great win. Let's talk about one of your favorite teams, Iowa, coming up big against Minnesota, the undefeated.
Yeah. All they did was ruin Minnesota's year. That's it.
When it's in conference, though, isn't it great to play spoilers?
It's great, but I'm a realist here. Iowa was not going to be in the playoff. It wasn't going to happen. They have terrible loss against Ohio State Iowa State. Sorry, and they're not going to get in there. So to see a team like Minnesota, who is realistically never been good. When's the last time they were good?
1941. This is their best start. They were 8-0 in 1941.
Exactly.
It's been a while.
Never.
Yeah. I wasn't there for it, but that's what they tell me.
I wouldn't mind seeing Minnesota in it. They did spoilers, which is great for Iowa Hawkeyes, and their fan base is like, hey, you couldn't beat us, so you're not a great team.
True.
But I think all it really does is make the normal teams go back into the playoffs like it normally does.
Absolutely. And Sean says that Jake and Drew, the Cornell Big Red and Syracuse football team need to do better. I agree with you, man. Syracuse and the rest of the ACC out there need to step up their play because right now Clemson is one of the only two teams that I'm going to say are just in the playoff right now and you don't need to worry about them. We'll talk about them a little bit later, though. For right now, let's talk about this Minnesota-Iowa game just really quick. To me, I'm not going to say Minnesota's dead in the water. I think if they can find a way to win that conference championship and somehow upset all these better teams than them, the committee will consider it. But still, Minnesota's not a sexy school.
Right, and Iowa is a ranked team.
True.
So the loss isn't as bad, but I still think it hurts.
It's got to be a sexy team that's going to make it in with one loss, in my opinion. And Minnesota just probably doesn't do it. I mean, it's like you said, it's a program that has not been towards the top of college football. They've been struggling for years and years and years. Even though they put together a great year this year, losing to a team like Iowa, I think is going to be it's almost like a death nail, even though they don't deserve it to be.
Yeah, and they have probably the best wide receiver coming out of this draft too.
Well, Jeremy Jeudy would disagree, but I get what you're saying.
I said probably.
Opinions. We'll talk about receivers coming up.
You know who could really use a receiver like that? The Titans.
Yeah, because we needed another high draft pick at wide receiver. It's not going to work for us.
A little bit smaller, faster guy? Yeah, you pick tall, slow guys. There's a difference.
Penn State versus Indiana. I'm not even going to dignify that with a response. Penn State versus Indiana. Drew, were you upset that Penn State had another team hang around with them? Because that's been their MO all season long. They let everybody hang around, and they beat them by like a touchdown. It's 7 points or less.
Right.
They're trying to crawl their way back into the playoffs after losing to Minnesota. Does this kind of just further the point that they don't deserve to be as highly ranked as they are? Because Indiana's been ranked.
Yeah, I know. I think they deserve the ranking that they have. It's just you're wanting to see Penn State blow some of those people out. You're wanting to see a big win from Penn State, and you just haven't seen it. This is still a good team. It's still a good organization. In all rights, this team should be dead in the water, and it's completely have turned around. I forget the coach's name in Penn State, but he has done
James Franklin.
Yeah, he's done a great job.
He looks like my Uncle Mike, too.
He's doing a great job not letting this organization die after all the scandals and all that stuff happened with it. I mean, they've definitely done well there. It's just it's time to see a big win. I mean, that's where you look at and I know we're not comparing, but you look at LSU, they're beating the crap out of lesser teams than them.
Right.
And that's what Penn State cannot do.
And so's Ohio State. So is Clemson, even though they've had an easier schedule and everyone's complaining about that. Same with Alabama. Everyone's like, they're not playing anybody. But those nobodies they're playing, they're killing. Right. Whether it's in conference or not. And we haven't seen that out of Penn State. I think it's a great point. I think Penn State is, like you said, it's been an amazing job by James Franklin turning that program around, just like it was with Vanderbilt. When was the last time Vanderbilt won 9 games outside in the SEC with someone other than James Franklin? Let me know that in the comments because I don't know what the answer is.
And did I read, too, is Derek Mason getting another year in Vanderbilt, too?
That's the thought, but it's been a pretty ugly one. We'll see. But then again, if you're Vanderbilt, you have, like, different expectations.
Do you think he's earned it?
Look, it hasn't been pretty, but it's also Vanderbilt. You're not getting 2 and 3. You're, like, struggling to get 3-star recruits here. So I don't love Derek Mason, but I think he's done a decent job now that he's settled into it. I know this year has been a huge step back, but 2 years ago, we were talking about this being one of the better teams in the SEC. And they're like, whoa, maybe this is the year they take the step forward. They didn't. I think they won 6 games.
Right.
But, again, I don't know that I fired Derek Mason either. We'll move on. We'll talk about Oklahoma and Baylor. But go ahead.
Let's get to Sean's comments. He has one for us. He said, do we think Eli Manning is going to retire from the New York Giants and the NFL?
He's a guy we haven't talked about hitting free agency at the end of this year. And I think Eli Manning is going to go out there looking for that bridge quarterback spot to try to continue his game somewhere. I don't think he's done. Regardless of how I feel about his play, I like that he's still somewhat of a competitor from the standpoint that he wants to keep playing and was upset that he was benched and everything else. Yeah. I don't think Eli's going to hang up the cleats.
Yeah, Sean, as far as what I've read, Eli wants to play again. He's not going to retire. I think even if he struggles to find a team, I think he'll still wait until there's an injury or whatever and get himself in there.
I totally agree with you.
I don't think that's going to be the issue. I think a team will pick him up, bring him in, and make him compete against one of their starters, a struggling starter.
And Brian says, what can Vandy do? It's a basketball school. It's very simple, Brian. You can spend the money, upgrade your facilities. But then again, it's nestled in the heart of downtown Nashville. It doesn't have the room to grow that a lot of places like Tuscaloosa, where you have all kinds of land out there, or take your pick, Knoxville, has more places where you can build. Vanderbilt doesn't have a lot of options because they're nestled in like the center of downtown Nashville. So, again, what can they do? They could throw a lot of money at the program because, again, they've got a lot of rich donors, okay? This is the Harvard of the South. This is a school that, if they committed to it, I think could have a better football program than they do. The problem is they keep their academics requirements so high that it's kind of forcing a lot of players to not be able to make it in.
Yeah. Sean, we love the comments, man. He says, Sonny Cortland in Cortland, New York, need to do better because Ithaca college football team has been good, and Sonny Cortland need to be fired. They need to fire their head coach. Dude, you got me.
Yeah. That one's a little out of my range. Dude, it's out of my depth.
To be honest with you, man, you probably know more than we do about it. If you feel that way, Sean, you're obviously an avid fan. You love sports. If you feel that way, I'm sure a majority of other fans and probably that college probably feels the exact same way you do.
He also wants to know, will CeCe Sabathia go to the Hall of Fame in baseball? I'm going to say eventually yes. I don't think he's a first ballot kind of guy, but I think with all he's done for the Yankees and the Indians before that, yeah. I think he's going to find his way into the Hall of Fame. And then Brian says Eli to the Panthers. The Panthers owner just came out and said we're not going to tolerate mediocrity forever. So I don't see a GM or even Ron Rivera signing off on an Eli Manning hire. I think they're going to try to make more of a splash move than that. I'm not saying it's impossible. I don't think that's a bad spot, especially when you talk about Kyle Allen struggling at times too and Cam Newton having a bunch of injuries. But, again, if your owner says we're not going to tolerate mediocrity, are you going to go sign Eli Manning at this point? And say, I'll be fine? Yeah, probably not.
No. To be honest with you, the owner could sit there and come out and say that all they want. Tyler Allen has earned the starting position. I know he struggled, but guys, let's remember, they've not built this team around him. They built around Cam Newton and his ability to run the ball. The guy didn't do the offseason, as the starter. Cam had all that. I'm not saying you don't go out and draft another quarterback, but then that means your locker room is literally Kyle Allen will be the most...
Kyle
Allen will be the most senior person in your locker room because they got Will Grier, they got Kyle Allen. I don't know why I keep calling him Tyler, but Kyle Allen, and then if you draft another one, maybe they'll go out there and put a big splash of free agency, but why would you want someone like that pushing Kyle? You need him to say, hey, we're going to give you the reins this year. Mm-hmm. Prove us why we started you all last year.
Don't create the controversies.
Exactly.
Yeah, and again, I don't know that I would sign him either, but that's because I hate Eli Manning. All right, let's go back to college football really quick. Let's talk about that Oklahoma-Baylor game because, again, Drew, they channeled their inner Patriots-Falcons game 28-3 at halftime. And I'll admit, I was like, this is over, and Baylor's a much better team than I thought they were, because I thought this was a team that kind of thrived off of playing lesser competition for the most part. This is a team that TCU almost beat, and they're not a terrible team, but they're not a good one either. TCU took them into, double or triple overtime just a week ago?
Right.
And then they jump out 28-3 against Oklahoma. I was like, just wow. That's incredibly impressive. And then it all kind of fell apart. Oh, man. I think Oklahoma, with Jalen Hurts, has been one of the more consistent teams in football this year. Even though you can say the Big 12 is not as tough as some of these other conferences, you can't take away what they've done. I know they have a bad loss to Kansas State. But beyond that, with one loss, Oklahoma is still very much in this. I think that comeback kind of proves it. The committee's going to have a hard time picking between Alabama, Oregon, Utah, and Oklahoma if Georgia does not win the SEC championship. Right. If Georgia loses, and we're talking about all four of those teams being in the running with one loss, who do you pick? I mean, Oregon's been great in spurts. Utah's been great pretty much all season long. And then Oklahoma, except for that one game against Kansas State, has been, just dominating people.
Who? With that being said, that happens. That scenario happens. Who are you picking to take that 4th seed?
Utah. Because, again, it's been consistent all year long. It won't happen because, again, not the sexy school, right? You want to have the sexy schools in the playoffs so the most people watch it. Oklahoma's a sexy school. People like the Sooners. You don't hear from Utah fans all the time. You hear from Sooners fans. You don't hear from the Utes fans quite as much as all these other teams. Even Oregon has a much better representation. I think Utah is the least likely of all those teams to make it.
But you like that.
But that, I think, has been the most consistent team. They're playing great defense, Drew. Their offense is high-flying. They throw the ball really well. They run the ball when they need to. Yeah. This, to me, is the most complete team that has the best resume to make it in. They're also, in my opinion, the least likely team to actually be picked to go to the college football playoff.
I don't really have one that I would think would be the favorite, but it's going to be Oregon or Alabama.
Yeah.
They want to do the Pac-12, which would make sense. Like, to bring...
And Utah is Pac-12, but barely.
I know, but Oregon is probably the higher name of the Pac-12. Mm-hmm. That's the school that you see more Duck fans walking around than the Utes. Isn't that who they are?
Yeah,
I thought
Utah
so.
Utes.
Yeah, I thought so. Or it's Alabama, just because the fan base is absolutely huge. I to be honest with you, nothing against Alabama. I just kind of wish that it wouldn't be Alabama. That's just not. I don't have any ill will towards them. I just like to see another team besides them, and I kind of feel the same way about Ohio State and Clemson, and even LSU's been a while, but it's nice to see other teams get in there.
Brian's got an interesting question here.
I wanted to get to
He
Brian.
says, do you guys think we've finally seen the end of the mobile quarterback era? Vic, RG3, Newton, these guys never seem to last. I think you just need to know what you're buying. And I think I give credit to teams like the Ravens that this year are kind of embracing that with Lamar Jackson. A lot of teams in the past have said, I'm taking a mobile quarterback and I'm going to change his game. I think RG3 was one of the biggest examples of that. Instead of that, coaches are saying, I know this guy's probably not a 15 to 20-year starter, but we need to maximize what he's good at. I don't think we're at the end of that. You've got Lamar Jackson. You've got guys like Josh Allen out there that are definitely more runners than they are throwers. I think we're still right in the middle of it, where teams are saying, I can do different things with my quarterback and still win football games.
Yeah, I know. It's not coming to an end. I don't think it ever will.
But will they ever be the best type of quarterback to have?
I definitely have a lot of views on this. One thing I want to say is when you bring up Michael Vick, remember Michael Vick's career did not end because of injury. It ended because of
dogfighting.
Because him being stupid and being involved in something that's illegal. You're right about Cam, but you got to remember also Cam was an MVP, took his team to a Super Bowl. I think when you draft a mobile quarterback and you're like, this guy is our quarterback of the future, that future that you're talking about is 8 to 10 years.
Right.
It's not a 15 to 20-year one.
Right.
We are going to take this guy because we have a team that's built now to win with his kind of skill set. Exactly what I believe the Ravens did this year. Last year drafting him, but what they're doing with him this year, I think the same thing with Josh Allen. Yeah, the big arm kind of got people excited, but when's the last time Buffalo had any kind of an excitement at a quarterback running the ball? Maybe Fitzpatrick when he was a little bit younger, maybe.
Yeah.
But that's it. I mean, this kind of athleticism, this kind of dynamic that those players bring to quarterback play excite NFL fans. It gets them excited. Trust me, Patrick Mahomes is exciting as he is. If it wasn't Patrick Mahomes, I'd probably want like a Lamar Jackson playing behind center, because when you watch a quarterback do that and tear up defenses, it's exciting as a fan to watch that happen.
The only thing I'll counter with that is you said you were pointing to Cam Newton in his MVP year. The only thing I'll kind of counter that is he did that with his arm, and we haven't seen Cam do that a lot. But Cam did that one with the arm.
He also had 13
he
rushing touchdowns.
He was still running, but we weren't like, oh wow, look, Cam Newton's just running better than everyone else, like we are with Lamar Jackson right now. Cam Newton was like,
but you gotta remember that's the high end of it. That's that's what you hope when you
that you're going to get a year or two.
Exactly.
Of that.
Yeah, you hope that you can develop this young player into a throwing quarterback. Kind of the same thing with Lamar Jackson. And to be honest, at this point, Lamar Jackson's leading the Pro Bowl vote. He has the most votes for the Pro Bowl. That is usually a huge sign on MVP.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. Also, Brian says, honestly, he almost threw his phone in the second quarter watching the OU game. I get it, man. It was frustrating, but at least they pulled it out, and you'll remember that game. I promise. You'll forget about how tough it was to watch the first half, and you'll remember where you were in the second half where they came back and dominated and beat Baylor, and hopefully, for your sake, made the college football playoff and made a splash there because of that game. This could be the turning point, and this is the kind of sexy win that even though when we're talking about it, we're like, man, they should have beat Baylor better than that.
Yeah.
The committee's going to say, look what they overcame.
Yeah.
Look what they've done.
And what? Baylor was undefeated.
Yeah, exactly. And they were ranked, 9 when that happened? 10?
Yeah.
11? I forget. But they were up there. Right. Now they dropped to 13. But
Brian also went off and said Sooners get over the Pac-12. The world wants to see Jalen Hurts head up against Alabama. So you're already putting Alabama in there.
But I'm not sure Alabama gets in.
And then you're also saying Oklahoma. So he's throwing both of those in. Who's out?
Right now,
Ohio State or Clemson? I mean, who comes out?
LSU or Georgia is already in because one of those teams is going to win the SEC championship, right? So when they win, you're going to have the SEC representative at least one. Right, and let's say they don't battle. Let's say one of them gets blown out, and we're going to go pick. Let's say LSU blows Georgia out for the sake of simplicity, and they're in, and Georgia's for sure out of it. You're going to have Ohio State in unless they trip up against Penn State or Michigan. But even then, if they win the Big 12. Everyone's going to say, man, Ohio State's literally destroyed everything in their path this year and haven't had that big trip-up game against the bad opponent that they usually do. You got Clemson, same thing, just waltzing in on bad competition, not looking too bad in the process. They had a couple scare games early, like the A&M game. You're like, man, they should have won that one a little bit better. The UNC game, they should have won that one better. But they're still undefeated. It's still Clemson. They're going in. You got one spot.
Yeah,
I really do. And it's either Alabama or it's Oklahoma or it's Utah or it's Oregon.
You're not. Ohio State's going to be in it. To be honest with you,
even if Penn State beats them this weekend, do you still put them in there?
It's not going to happen.
No, it's not. But let's say they do. Entertain me, Drew.
So the reason I don't think that's going to happen, and I hate to say this, I think Ohio State is the most complete team in college football right now.
And I don't know that it's the first time that's the case. I agree with you. I think they've just been the team that, because they go into every game the heavy favorite, sometimes you let the guard down. You're not always playing the best competition. That's why they have bad losses to teams like Indiana and, what was it last year? It was Purdue last year. Yeah. This time it seems like Ryan Day's got all the troops fired up and ready to go every week. And I'll give him credit. I said this is the year Ohio State takes a small step back. They arguably don't have
their best defender, too.
Yeah, exactly. So, look, I'll say this about Oklahoma. They have the potential to get in, but it's got to be a Big 12 championship at this point. And I think most teams are going to need to either win the championship, like Oregon and Utah. It's pretty much got to be the Pac-12 championship for one of those two. It's got to be the Big 12 for any of them too. But it's going to be really tough if Georgia plays LSU in a close game to keep Georgia out. Even if they lose it and have 2 losses, they're going to say, man, they battled with LSU.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you, and everyone's going to want to see that matchup again. Sean says Josh Allen is his guy on the Buffalo Bills. Man, they got to still build around him, but you definitely want to be excited about him being there. He also says the Chiefs has McCoy on our team. We do. He's got fumbling issues, man. It drives me nuts.
And Brian said that I'm right. If Penn State can beat Ohio State and win that Big Ten championship, that they'll get in. But again, is that going to happen? They've been struggling through a lot of games this year. And I like James Franklin, but losing Saquon Barkley and a lot of the other talent, like Amani Oruwariye, guy we haven't talked about in a long time, Penn State's not the same team. They lost a lot of talent and have not been able to replace at the level that teams like Ohio State and Oklahoma and Clemson and Alabama have been able to replace at. And I think that's why we're seeing closer ones. For Ohio State? No, I mean, I like James Franklin. He's not Coach of the Year. Coach of the Year to me is Ryan Day. Because
I'm just asking. I agree. Yeah. I mean, you're talking about a team that's ranked top 10. You're talking about a team that's
they've been amazing. Yeah,
right. I mean, with a lot of talent being lost, I mean, and they're still competitive.
Well, that's a fair point.
That is a very solid resume to be coach of the year. I agree with you. I think it's day 2.
I think it's gonna be Ed O from LSU if they win the SEC championship undefeated, right?
Yeah, probably.
I mean, they beat Alabama, so it's gonna be Ed O.
But I wouldn't consider LSU the most complete team. I could still consider Ohio State.
They play defense. They run the ball, Drew. They throw. I mean, they're good.
They're good.
They're good. But Ohio State might be more complete too.
What happens when they lose their best defender? Arguably their best player on the team.
Oh, well, that would be Joe Burrow, in my opinion. When Joe Burrow leaves, that's out the window because he's been an elite quarterback. As soon as that happens, I don't know about LSU, but we'll see. For right now, it's Ed O for Coach of the Year. I like what James Franklin has done, but you could say that about last year when they had Saquon Barkley. You could say, man, this guy took this program that had the death sentence against it with all the sexual assault and everything, and actually made him a program. It was one of the best hires in college football. Now, I think when you look at it, LSU, to me, it's got to be Coach O if I'm picking someone for Coach of the Year.
Yeah. Cool, Sean, man. I'll check it out after the show.
All right, we'll talk about this week really quick, and then we'll talk about Thursday Night Football and get out of here, Drew. Penn State versus Ohio State. It's definitely the number 1 game this week.
Yeah.
Number 9 versus number 2. Anytime you're talking about this kind of matchup this late in the season, it's the game to watch. And I can't sugarcoat it. Penn State, I think, should come in as a heavy underdog here. They haven't looked good in the past couple weeks as well. When you look at it, they've allowed 80% completion rates against them in the past 2 games, 710 yards through the air, 4 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. And now you're going to go play Penn State, or now you're going to play Justin Fields in Ohio State. Are you picking the upset?
No.
Did I sell that at all?
Not at all, man. It's a struggle. It's gonna take a team like Clemson or LSU or even Georgia maybe to beat Ohio State. It's gonna take an out of division rival to beat Ohio State.
So Michigan's done. They're dead in the water too.
Sorry,
Don't see it.
no.
I know. I'm with you too. It's still at least a highly ranked opponent that we haven't really seen Ohio State match up against as much this year. They played Wisconsin, but that was coming off a bad loss from Indiana. This will be the first time they're playing a top 10 team, and they can kind of go into this playoff and say we deserve to be number 2 or number 1 going into this even, and deserve to challenge LSU for all that they've done.
Brian says he needs Penn State to win to shake it up, obviously.
That would make things a lot easier for Oklahoma, or at least somewhat easier. You need the Penn State win now and then maybe a loss in the championship game. That would be nice for any Oklahoma fan. I think the big one, though, is the Pac-12 guys. And we're not going to talk about them because they're playing both Arizona teams. One's playing Arizona, the other's playing Arizona State. And those two have been kind of doormats that have been walked on a little bit this year. But Utah and Oregon, those are the guys that it would make your life a lot easier if they could both drop one. Because right now, with one loss for everybody, they're already ahead of you in the rankings. They're going to play each other in the Pac-12 championship. I think Oklahoma has a tougher schedule and a tougher setup, especially like Oregon, that went out of their way and played Auburn week 1 in the playoffs, which is still a highly ranked team and has played one of the hardest schedules in college football.
Yeah.
I think Oregon's the team that you're most afraid of, but Utah right behind them. Those are the guys you need to lose.
I know you're heavily on Oklahoma. I think Oregon is, in my opinion, the heavy favorite if something happens to Georgia. I really honestly do.
I like Oregon too. I do, and I think Justin Herbert has the NFL aspirations. We're going to talk about that. He's a guy you're going to be hearing from. This needs to be, in my opinion, if he's going to be a top 2 or top 3 pick to replace Tua with his injury, this is where he's got to turn it on.
Yeah. Yep.
All right, couple more games that you should watch. Texas A&M versus Georgia. Georgia at home for this one. This is going to be a good one in our last matchup of ranked teams this season. I know what you're saying, Drew. Week 12 in college football. How do I only have 2 matchups between ranked teams? But all I can tell you, man, is just the way they scheduled it. A lot of idle teams, a lot of teams that are playing some cupcakes this week. This should be a good game at least.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a good game. Brian says, what happened to Washington? Dang. I'll need to check the Ducks and Utes' remaining schedule.
Yeah, well, Washington was a good team, and then they lost a lot of talent last year. And, again, not everybody can replace top 5, top 10 rosters in college football in a year in and year out basis. Again, it comes down to how attractive is your school. I like Washington, but are they
I always forget the quarterback name of Washington.
Browning.
I'll be interested to see what he can do in the NFL. As we all know, I'm more of an NFL guy than college guy. Not that I just love the sport, but that's why I watch college football, is because the next step.
Level. Yeah. And again, he's not the guy he was. It's going to be something where he's going to take that step back, but he could be a good third, second round pick for somebody
who might get a chance to play.
Titans. Anyway,
he might get a chance to play.
This A&M game versus Georgia. The only thing I want to say about it is A&M started 3-3, but since then they've won 3 straight, and in the past 3 games have put up 200 yards both passing and rushing in both of those games. This is going to be a tough matchup versus a team in Georgia that has not allowed 20 points all year long. Georgia's strength is its defense this year. They've lost a lot of weapons on offense. If they can put up another sub-20 number against an offense run by Jimbo Fisher that's high-flying, this is going to be the resume builder that if you lose that SEC championship, they're like, well, we have all these other good wins, and we still deserve to be in.
Yeah, I agree with you.
A couple more to watch.
That being said, Georgia wins.
You think so?
Yeah.
I think so too, but I think this is going to be a scary one. I think it's going to be like 24-21, and they'll break that 20-point streak, and Georgia wins in a nail-biter.
Okay.
Couple more games, and again, these aren't ranked teams, but Baylor, number 13, going up against Texas. The season could absolutely end. I know last week was a bad loss, but they could go into this with one loss, win against Texas in convincing fashion, and say, it was a fluke. It was a fluke. We let our guard down, and Oklahoma came back. And maybe we deserve to be in the playoff talk. I'm not sure I believe that, but I'm saying, like, if it's going to happen, it's got to happen this week for Baylor for me. So maybe you watch this game too.
Brian says they made a mistake by joining the SEC. Bye, Felicia.
Oh,
Texas A&M.
No. 2 years from now, 3 years from now, mark my words, with Jimbo Fisher. College football is all about who your head coach is and the recruiting he's going to do. Jimbo Fisher coming from Florida State. There's a reason Florida State sucks right now, and it's because Jimbo Fisher left. 2 or 3 years from now, A&M, you're going to be like, damn, they're pushing Alabama and all these other teams.
It's a good
possibility. And again, the West is always the division to watch out for in the SEC.
Baylor versus Texas. To be honest with you, Texas have had some upset games. They played the upset in a couple of them. They're not obviously a ranked team. They don't have any kind of like chances to play in the championship.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're going to play Baylor tough. I really
too.
Honestly do. I don't think this is going to be an easy win for Baylor. But I think it is a game that you need to talk about, because if Baylor wants any chance at all to be remotely talked about being in the playoffs, they need to come out and like dominate like a 58-0 kind of game where it's like, it was a fluke. Look how good we actually are.
Yeah, and again, this is one of those storied franchises in college football. So when you beat Texas, it has more clout than when you beat Texas A&M.
Right.
Or at least it used to. But now you're going to go into this game and say, man, they beat Texas, and they did it in convincing fashion, which Texas isn't a terrible team, but they're still trying to rebuild the program. They didn't live up to expectations, kind of like somebody said at the beginning of the season, when I was like, they won like 7 of their 9 games last year by like less than 6 points.
You did.
I just think Texas is one of those schools that when you beat them, the committee's like, well, that's a good program, even though they're not a good program right now, but it carries more weight because of what they've done in the past. Finally, TCU, Oklahoma. Oklahoma needs to win this game against a team that just gave Baylor fits and took them into, triple overtime? Yeah. And it took almost a fluky-like play to beat them. I think when you look at TCU, this is not going to be a roll-over-and-die team. This is just like Texas. They're playing some spoilers in the Big 12. Oklahoma's got to watch a step here, and they need to come out and have a better start, because I think if you go down to TCU, maybe you don't have that result twice where you come back.
Yeah, but I think this also has the same scenario where Oklahoma wants to prove that they're a better team. And, even though they're used to playing in TCU, I think this is just it favors Oklahoma a lot. Even though they won last week, it was still kind of it was a great comeback win. It was a great comeback win. You don't want to take anything away from it, but I think it also kind of hurt them too, where it's like, we're better than this.
You shouldn't go down 28-3.
Exactly. You should have had a lead all the way through.
But they're undefeated. I know.
I get it, but it's Oklahoma.
Yeah, and everyone's like, Baylor's undefeated, but so's Minnesota, and what does that mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're 100% right. And again, this is the hardest part about only picking 4 teams, because right now 1 through 8 should be in the playoffs. You could say 1 through 12 should be in the playoffs. I mean, LSU, Ohio State, Clemson, Georgia, Alabama, Oregon, Utah, Oklahoma, Penn State. At the very least, every one of those teams deserves a swing of the bat in the playoffs, and that's 9. You got Florida. That's a great team, even though they've lost 2. They're out of it because they've lost 2 games in college football. They deserve a shot.
You got to remember who their quarterback is no longer who
they
started with, too.
Minnesota, Michigan, Baylor, all these teams deserve it. There's like 13 teams in college football. At the very least, you got to pick 8. And I know I've been banging that drum for a long time, and I know you guys are tired of
it. We should probably keep banging it.
Yeah, but
it's the truth.
It's got to be 8 games. It's got to be 8. And there's just 8 good teams in college football that could beat anyone at any given week.
I don't really know how to sit there. You obviously can't take the championships games away. You still need those. You need the Big 10, you need the Big 12 championship games, but how do you fit an 8-week or an 8-team playoff into the schedule? How do you
shave a money game, or just take one step early, or 1 week earlier and start the college football playoff? Start it around Christmas.
It affects tuition, and not tuition, but it affects schooling and all that stuff. I mean, there is a reason why they have such a strict schedule base. I think it needs to happen.
I do too.
But I think we're talking about scratching a regular season game.
If it's going to happen, one less money game.
And so, right. So what it is they have to pick the 1 through 8 a lot quicker, and then those other teams have to make up a scheduled game late in the season.
Yeah.
Because you got people let's just say, for an example, like Florida, where they had aspirations of being in the playoffs, don't make it. Well, you're not just going to end the season.
Yeah.
You're going to want them to still play. There's still money to be made because the Gators such as a huge fan base.
So maybe you leave a utility week after that. You say, go ahead and schedule somebody after the fact.
Exactly.
And let's see a good game. And that'll be before the bowl games. Are you scheduling a tough game before you go to a bowl game? Probably not. But hey, maybe that's your money game. Yeah. Where if you don't make the playoff, you'll play an extra money game at the end of the season.
Yeah, they can play Mudane or whatever.
North Texas, yeah.
Yeah, whatever.
North Texas State University.
Moldane or whatever that M word is. Some college that no one's ever been to or heard of. I think they're their tuitions, they give you $1 to come there.
Exactly. Brian says Oklahoma versus TCU. He's saying 65-3. The committee is watching. I hope so, man. Again, that's the kind of convincing win you need. But I see more of 38-24, and they let TCU hang around for a little while and then pull it out in the fourth quarter. This has got to be TCU's not going to roll over. This is not a bad team. Not a great one. Not a bad team.
This committee's also not stupid.
They almost spoiled Baylor.
You take Oklahoma out, a lot of Big 12 fans are not going to be watching the playoffs.
Exactly. And that's what they're saying with everybody. But they're also saying, man, you know who's great? These 2 SEC boys. So
right.
It's definitely a tough call for the committee. Brian also says he thinks Jake told me about the cupcake games give the little schools a lot of money, but shaving the FBS game would do it. Again, a lot of these programs only survive because they make literally $1 million to go and get beat up by these good teams.
Yeah.
The point I have is, look, sometimes that's the free market. Sometimes you just have to have a better product than what you're going to. If that bottoms out some FCS schools, I don't want that to happen, but they are going to have to find another way to raise the money as opposed to just going and playing Alabama and getting, murdered on national TV in week 2 and then being like, oh, it doesn't matter what else happens. We get our money.
And you're probably also going to have a lot of, naysayers of making the game before the bowl game because – you don't want your stars to get hurt when you're going to go play a no-name team. And what if they beat them? Because they're not playing your start.
And here's the other thing. If you're a Florida player, let's say you're the left tackle, and you're going to the NFL, and you know that, how hard are you playing in this game?
Right, exactly.
In a game that does not matter.
So as much as I love an 8-team playoff, it doesn't match up.
It's not easy.
It doesn't match. It doesn't match up statistically, or what's the word where you're looking at Logistically, yeah.
The logistics are difficult.
It doesn't match up that well.
The best thing I can say, I know they want to live in that week in between the NFL playoff or the NFL Super Bowl and everything else, or they want to live in that week right after New Year's Day, I should say, not the NFL playoffs, but
I know
they want to live in that spot. Right. Push it back a little bit later. Push that back. Add another week, and if you're that good, if you're that good, you have aspirations to move on to the next level. Push it back one more, make them play one more game if you're going to make it. Right. There's 8 teams. Give them an extra week of rest if you need to. Move it 2 weeks, but find a way to make it work.
Right. Last question about college, and it's going to lead us into the NFL stuff. Do you think the lack of games played during the college affects the long season in the NFL for rookies? Because if you look at a lot of this, a lot of rookies are hurt early on in their careers in the NFL, and then they get better later on. Do you think prolonging the college schedule would help players going into the NFL, getting used to the long schedule the NFL has?
I just think it's a liability issue when you talk about these guys not making any money. I understand. Yeah. But even now, the colleges aren't paying them. This is the college is saying you can go make your own money somewhere else. So,
but
Does it impact the NFL?
It's a little bit easier now than what it was.
Does it impact the NFL? Yeah, because I think there's such a thing as the rookie wall. You get to that game 12, game 13, and that's usually the end of your season in college.
Right.
And now all of a sudden you're like, I got 4 more weeks of the most important football for me, and then I've got maybe playoffs afterward. Yeah, it 100% affects these guys. But what's the answer? Can you ask a guy who's not making any money, and until now not making any money off endorsements, to go play in a grueling schedule that's 20 weeks long, like the NFL does when they get to the Super Bowl, plus preseason? Again, it's not fair to those guys. I think if you're going to do that, they got to find a way to put some money in these dudes' pockets, because you are taking a risk every time you step out there.
No doubt.
Yeah.
I mean, but it's also for the love of the game.
Yeah.
It is what it is. I mean, it's just you kind of just cross your fingers and do a quick little prayer, and you go out there. I mean,
but for every guy that makes the NFL,
you look at Tua's injury.
Yeah,
unfortunate. It definitely affected his draft stock. But then you look at players that have been in the league for a long period of time: Tom Brady, Patrick Mahomes, Drew Brees. They all get hurt. Mm-hmm. I mean, it is what it is.
That is the game. Yeah,
it's part of it. I mean, what about Bo Jackson? Because this is Tua's. His injury is very similar to Bo Jackson. It ended his career early. Do you think Bo Jackson looks back and go, man, I wish I wouldn't have played? I guarantee he doesn't say that.
No, I don't think so. But I think, again, what you're asking, for everyone that wants to point to the NFL guys, there's 10 guys that never make it. Even on teams like Oklahoma, even on teams like Alabama, there are guys that don't translate to the next level.
That's right. I really hope the XFL works out.
Exactly. That's kind of my point, where, like, if this is the end of it and you go and have that level of injury and you're not going anywhere, how fair is that to you? That's why I think, again, I've been all for paying guys.
But I agree with you. Yeah. I agree with you. But sometimes this is the 15 minutes of fame that these guys will have, and that's it. This is for the rest of their life. And just knowing some people and talking to people, and, they were college football, basketball, whatever, and some never even played a minute, but they practice with the team. And
it means everything to you.
It does. They still relive every moment of that. I agree. Injuries are terrible, and especially the terrible ones like Tua had, where it affects money.
Yeah,
it's terrible. But I don't think if you ask any of them, would you have changed it? I don't think any of them would say that. No, I would not change it.
There might be some, because I've met guys like that where they're like, man, I wish I didn't pitch so much in baseball because I never went anywhere and my shoulder's worn out and it hurts me every day. But they're like, I enjoyed the experience. But again, they're like, I wish my body wasn't
coaching and poor new.
Baseball is also a different sport. Again, if you pitched, I mean, I didn't even pitch that much. I only pitched till I was in like ninth or 10th grade, and my shoulder's messed up. It's like, it's something that when you look at it, Drew, if you're going to ask these guys to play at an NFL schedule length, there has to be some sort of financial compensation. And I understand what you're saying. It does affect the NFL play, for sure.
Right.
And that's part of conditioning. It's part of everything else.
Yeah. So obviously I wouldn't go anywhere. My 5'8" frame doesn't really scream NFL for anybody, or even college ball for that matter. And I made a decision in high school after taking kind of a terrible hit in practice that this was no longer my goal in life, was to play football. Mm-hmm. And
you could have been Edelman, man.
I could have been. I could have been a lot of things, but I wasn't. But I made that decision. Some of these guys have already gone through injuries in high school, Pee Wee League, and college. I mean, this is just something that they all do and accept the consequences of. I do want to get to Brian's comment. He says, you should be able to donate 50% and keep 50% of jersey sales and signatures at least or something to make these kids who make $1 billion business.
Yeah, I think the problem is Title IX. Again, when you look at it, when we're talking about combat sports and sports where you stand a huge risk to injure yourself, like football, I think Title IX is kind of an antiquated thing, because the idea is they don't want to discriminate against anybody's sport. They want to make sure that the money you spend on football, you're going to spend on women's sports and everything else, so everyone has their chance to do everything. But I don't think that's necessarily the right way to look at things. These guys are risking a lot to play football, more than anything. I mean, basketball, yes, a little bit. You can do a lot of bad things to your knees and your ankles. Baseball, too. You can mess up your shoulders, and everything else can happen to you, even though that's an easier sport, especially if you're a fielder, than some of these others are. But I don't think it's fair to say, just because football makes all this money and everything else, that we need to take all that money and give it to them. If you really want to do it, we need to talk about Title IX. And again, that's going to take opportunities away from other sports. But if nobody's watching Frisbee golf, do we need to be giving them a chunk of what football is making because you want to have everybody have the opportunity to have to play the sport that they want to play? This is a conversation that needs to be had because that's where the money's going. When you're saying why can't they do this, Brian? They can't do it because the money has to go to other sports.
Right, and it just. And I've said this before in past shows, but the only thing that frustrates me is because of the sport that they love, that they play, that most of these schools make their most money off of them and what they do, they're restricted versus someone like who plays the trumpet can get a full ride scholarship and give trumpet lessons and get paid for it.
Right. And
there's nothing against them. And I get it. Like, it's trumpet. He's probably not, more than likely, not going to go anywhere.
You're not going to monetize that a whole lot.
But it's still, I think it should be considered the same thing. If college players cannot make off of their skill set, then it should be across the board.
Well, I think it's the other way. I understand.
My point is,
it's not fair. Yes,
it's got to be across the board or not at all.
But I think it's just got to be across the board. Everybody makes money.
Agreed.
Like if you've got a talent,
100%.
you can make money off.
That's
it.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
because trust me, regardless if the dealership across the street from the college gives the quarterback of the college money, he's more than likely still going to give money to the college because he wants his logo out there too. The college is just a greedy monopoly business that's sitting there saying, I don't want any of my profits to go away.
And not to get too political, but again, anytime government gets involved, there's a lot of red tape. And that's exactly what this is. Title IX has so much red tape around it, the colleges are afraid to pay these guys because it's going to open up all the can of worms. Because everyone's going to say, well, Title IX says I deserve everything that the football players get. And if they're getting paid, you need to pay me $40,000 for a sport that nobody's watching.
Yeah.
Like college baseball. How many people are watching college baseball outside of the College Baseball World Series? Some, but it's not football where you're getting 100,000 people showing up to a game.
I watch women's softball World Series a lot more.
For different reasons. But volleyball too. But
well, yeah. And the swim team. And the gymnastic team. And the all-girls.
Do you watch women's weightlifting?
Anything the women are doing.
Okay, you're watching it. But that's exactly my point.
Brian says here in Norman, he thinks football alums donate to women's gymnastics too. People take care of each other. Brian, that is a great scenario, and I love every bit of that happens there. But unfortunately,
we all love volleyball, Brian. Unfortunately, if there was one sport we're subsidizing, it's volleyball, right?
Unfortunately, the people that are making all this money aren't feeling the same way that everyone else is, and that's where I think we stand up as a mass people, and we're literally saying these kids deserve to get paid.
Yeah, especially if you're going to stick your neck on the line.
Right.
And I think that's the biggest difference in any.
I even think baseball, even basketball, even though they're less physical sports, these kids should be able to pay it. It's their likeness.
They're 18. They're old enough to get shot at. They're old enough to make money, right? That's the way I've always looked at it.
Yeah, they all should be able to drink a beer too, but that's just me.
Yeah, I know. And everything else. We're not going into it. Again, this isn't politics around the bar. It's sports around the bar. So we'll pump the brakes.
What have I been doing this whole entire time?
I know. All right, let's talk Colts Texans. Let's go back to the NFL because, again, we're going to round out with this. It's going to be a good game. This has massive implications when you talk about the Texans losing last week to the Ravens in bad fashion. They're going to get to play the Colts at home. For the winner's the leader in the division. This is huge, Drew.
Yeah. I think the South is the AFC South is just a tough division. I think every team has a legitimate chance to find themselves in the playoffs. It just kind of depends on where they can find a weakness and get themselves in there. And I think the Texans kind of got popped in the mouth last week, and they just kind of, there's a bitter taste that's left in them. And I think that is going to be the downfall of the Colts. I think the Colts are the better team all around. Obviously, I think quarterback is a little bit higher with Deshaun Watson than Jacoby Brissett. But because of the bitter loss that the Texans dealt with and of the way I think the South is going to end, I'm going to go with the Texans to win this game. I think the South is going to come down to the very last game of the season. If it's the Titans and the Jags, or I don't know what these two might play each other at the end of the year too. I'm not for sure.
Titans have the Colts or the Texans the last game of the year.
No, I thought it was the Titans and the Jags.
Well, they play this week for the.
Well, I know.
time.
I thought they were the last.
Oh, okay. Normal. They've done it like 12 times in a row, but this is the first year in a long time. What it is. Yeah.
But it's going to come down to that final division game. But I again, Colts better team. Texans still win.
I'm going to go the other way. I think the Texans healthy are a better team than the Colts are. now that Andrew Luck is gone. But I think the Colts are the team that have all the rhythm. And if you look at the way these two teams played last week, and I know that doesn't always translate, the Texans got murdered through the air and on the ground by the Ravens. I think when you look at what the Colts did last week on the ground against Jacksonville, the much better defense at this point, they're going to do the same thing on the ground. I know Marlon Mack broke his hand. He's probably going to miss the rest of the season. Maybe he comes back for the playoffs. Odds are Marlon Mack is gone. They still have Jordan Wilkins. They still have Nyheim Hines. They still have they have an army of guys you've never heard of who are about to come in here and
run
the ball all over the
You're
Houston
higher
Texans.
on those running backs than I am, but I think Marlon Mack loss is huge. That was going to be my final outing of this, but I'm glad you brought it up. I don't mean to interrupt you, but I think the Marlon Mack loss is huge. I do think the run game is going to be what they focus on. I just don't think you had the same kind of talent with these guys without Marlon Mack there.
And I think it's all the hog mollies up front. It's all them big boys pushing everyone around. If you look at how Quentin Nelson's turned this offensive line around, and we don't give him enough credit, the Colts are going to, I think, bully the Texans again on the offensive line or on the defensive line. We're going to see them win in the trenches, and that's going to be the difference here. Jacoby Brissett's going to have another one of those 180-yard passing games. I'm going to be like, is he really that good? But he's not going to make any mistakes, and that's the difference. Yeah. Deshaun Watson's probably going to be under siege. He's been under siege for a long time now, but I think that's going to be the difference. You're still going to have a big game out of him. It's still going to be close. This is going to be a good one. I'm glad to watch this game on Thursday Night Football, not just because it's the division where my team resides in, but this is going to be a good and important game on a Thursday night. I'm not watching the Redskins play the Jets.
Yeah. I go for a different final thought. Like I said, I'm picking the Texans. Watch for Carlos Hyde to have a big game. There's no doubt about the offensive line of the Texans is struggling, but the one way to help that and get up the pressure off of Deshaun Watson is hand the rock off. Carlos Hyde, Kansas City never should have traded him away. They should have kept him there and just brought McCoy in and just had 5 running backs on the roster.
But they got like a 9th-round pick.
Either way,
out of 7.
Either way, going forward, he might be worth, if you're sitting there on the waiver wire, you're sitting there trying to decide who to put in that flex option. I think Carlos Hyde's going to see the rock often, and I think he's going to find some holes in this defense who is good at stopping the run. Okay, let me rephrase that. They're decent at stopping the run. I still think it's going to be the Texans that win this game.
I'm going to go Colts. So we'll have an actual head-to-head matchup, which I'm glad to have. We've been agreeing too much lately. I'm ready to go back to disagreeing with you. Let's fight, Drew. Let's fight.
Well, what? Okay, real quickly, because we pick all the games throughout the year. Mm-hmm. The season or the off show, both of us picking together was destroying us. And after last week, what happened?
We mauled them. Again, we had an 11-3 week. The show had 6-8, so we're back on track.
Right.
With what we picked in the offseason.
We're all within one game of each other, minus me and you are 2.
Yeah, exactly. So it's all close, which is fun to see. It's been close pretty much since we started. Yeah. This is going to be another one of those games that hopefully is the decider. Hopefully I pull out in front. But you never know. Again, hopefully maybe you bring it in tight, and then I'll get to beat you in a much more flashy way at the end of the season. That's what I'm looking forward to.
Drew's magic's about to come out at the end of the season.
I guess we'll see. All right,
Matthew, good to see you, man. Glad that you got in. Too bad it's the end of the show, but it's always good to see you, man.
Exactly. We got some special thanks here.
Yeah, guys, I just want to give a special thanks to everyone that commented, and if I missed you, I'm so sorry. It was a very good show. But Sean, special thanks to Brian for being there from the moment 1 to the very end.
Sean's been here, too. Remember, Sean opened up the show.
I know. I think Sean's been gone for a minute. Sean, if you're still there, I want to give you a special thanks, too. Jacob, Jesse, Nathan, Scott, Frank, Chris, and Matthew. You guys are awesome. Thank you.
And Brian, again, he says, real as always. Good night, fellas. Good night to you, too. Ian, I saw you watching, man. I know you probably couldn't comment, but we're glad you're here, too. It's been a fun show. We'll be back on Friday to talk about all the rest of this action going on in the NFL this week, as well as whatever happens in the Colts and Texans game. We're going to talk about how both those teams are trash and my team's better than them. I hope you're there for that. Again, it's going to be fun. I can't wait for this game.
Or you see tears.
Exactly. They're so good. What are we going to do, Drew? What are we going to do? We'll be back on Friday to talk about it. And again, it was a fun show. Thank you guys so much for hanging in there. It was a good time.
It was.
We'll be back on Friday, 7:45 Eastern, 6:45 Central. So as always, I am Jacob Bartender. This is Drew. We will see you then.
See ya.